everybody. Welcome to the final 2020 episode of Authentically Detroit, broadcasting live from the Lower East Side here in the city, powered by Eastside Community Network and sponsored by none other than the Ford Foundation, now a content partner to the new bridgedetroit.com. I'm Orlando Bailey.
And I'm Donna Davidson.
Thank you for listening in and supporting our efforts to build a platform of authentic voices for real people on the east side of Detroit. We want you to like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on whatever platform you listen to us on. We drop a new episode every week, so be sure to turn on those notifications. To round out this year, we've invited friends to join us to talk about the big moments of 2020, and there definitely have been a lot. And then we want to look ahead to 2021 and see what everyone has cooking. Joining us today are Detroit superstars. Kevin Ryan is the program officer on the Cities and States team with the Ford Foundation. Also joining us is Meredith Freeman. Meredith is the Director of Alignment and Impact Investing for the Max M. and Marjorie S. Fisher Foundation. We also have Detroit powerhouse Sarida Scott joining us. Sarida is the Program Officer for the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. And last but certainly not least, we have Nathaniel L. Wallace. Nathaniel, what the L stand for? He's joining us.
You will never know. You will never know. That was not in the questionnaire that we got. That was not in the runner show.
Nate is the Detroit director of the Knight Foundation. Kevin, Meredith, Sarida, and Nate, welcome to Authentically Detroit.
Great, thank you.
Thank you
for having us.
How did we get everybody on at the same time? I mean, this is serendipitous, don't you think, Donna?
It's a blessing. I was like, wow, what a blessing to be able to really hear from people who are in the know about what's going on. And I'm certain have some strong opinions because so much has happened this past year and so much is going to happen in the coming year. I'm not on news overdose, but you know.
It is. And this is Sarida and Nate's first time on. Meredith and Kevin are old pros. And so let's be sure to haze Nate and Sarida, Donna. Okay, let's really get
I thought for sure Nate had come on before. We talked about him coming on months ago and just the year got lost. So it didn't get away from us. And Sarida, I haven't talked to you since you entered philanthropy. And I know that's a whole new worldview. So yeah.
I mean, you know, they've been curving us. It's not like we tried. We haven't tried. Like they the master of the curve. Listen.
All right.
I love y'all though. I can't believe 2020 is almost over and that this is our last show of the year. It's been a crazy ride, but let's just check in as humans first. How is everybody?
I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
When the electors finally, when the elector count went to 306, I breathed easier. I don't even watch the news. Well, I didn't watch the news, but now I'm kind of addicted to it. And they keep saying the same thing over and over again, but I keep wanting to find out that our nation is safe and we can move on. And so as of yesterday, it was my sister's birthday, and the electors, voted, and my good friend's brother was moved out of ICU and removed from a respirator. So it was a good day today.
That's nice. Kevin, how you doing?
Well, the year's almost over and we're wrapping up our work this week. So I'm trying to cram everything into this week so that I can start the new year off with as clean a slate as possible. So I'm pretty good. And I feel blessed just because, I've talked to you all about this before. My dad, who has a lot of health issues, has actually been doing very well over the past 6 months, better than he's actually done in 4 or 5 years. So I just feel extremely blessed that he's doing well and that, folks in the family are good. And I also just feel blessed to be at Ford and be able to do the work that we do and to partner with these 3 folks to do this work this year has been so tragic and really challenging in many ways, but to have these 3 folks as partners has been a real blessing for me too.
Yeah, that's dope. It's so cool that you all are talking to each other. Meredith, how are you?
I'm good. As a human, just trying to find some balance. Looking at social media and the news, I was either extremely sad or extremely angry. So I just felt myself going to these extremes. And, I love my yoga, and I wasn't able to connect with my yoga community like I wanted to. Zoom is not the same, so just trying to find balance, but feeling blessed because I also have, a parent with, extreme health issues, and I'm kind of sandwiched, that sandwich generation between parents and kids, and trying to make sure that everybody along the spectrum is doing well. But no complaints, and very grateful and blessed, and yeah, feeling good.
Happy to hear it. Nathaniel L. Wallace, how are you, brother? I like messing with him.
I know. Jesus
Because
Christ.
let me tell you, like, he always got something smart to say, like, he'll say a remark. So I'm like trying to catch him up.
Man, it's been a year. This year's been exhausting. And I think to Meredith's point, just the highs and lows of the year has been, it's been draining. And then it's been no distractions, right? So it's been the highs and the lows and having to sit in those highs and lows, for an extended amount of time. So it's been a year, and it's made me extremely grateful for family. It's made me extremely grateful for friends. And really just, this year's, even though it's been a really tumultuous year, this year's enabled me to really just take a step back and take a pause and really kind of think about the things that matter, the thing that's important, and get those things in alignment. So, while it's been a crazy year, I'm blessed and I'm thankful. So, yeah, glad to turn the page though. Glad to turn the page.
That's right.
Yeah.
Sarida, how you looking over there? How are you? Long time no see, Sarida Scott.
I know. Too long. I'm feeling similarly like everyone else. It's been a hell of a year, limping a little bit to the end of the year, ready for a break. But I'm very fortunate as well. My family's doing well. I made it through my first year in philanthropy. Helping these folks. It's been a while. But I'm feeling very grateful and looking forward to, as Nate said, kind of putting this one behind us and moving forward.
Sweet.
How are you, Orlando?
I'm good. I have this rush of energy to just close out this week because hopefully it's my last week of work. So, the news business, of course, is fluid. I put out a plea yesterday on Twitter for the world to stop just for a couple of weeks to actually give us a break, because it'll be a drag having to stop, break, and come into work and do something. So I'm hoping that these politicians behave, that the world stays okay for a couple of weeks. But I'm good. Closing out the year, trying to close out as strong as we can. I like what Sarida said, sort of limping, transition from ECN to bridge with no break. And so it's just been, a whirlwind. So I'm excited for this break.
And you transitioned right at the point of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So not only was there no break, but you transitioned into stress.
Right.
They mailed me my computer. My computer was sitting on the front porch. I was like, oh, they serious.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, no office, but you gonna get this work. And so the work began right away. All right, y'all, it's time for Fresh Off the Press, news that we are thinking about. If you have pieces that you want discussed on Authentically Detroit, you can hit us up on our socials at Authentically Detroit on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or you can email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. Donna, Fresh Off the Press.
Actually, I don't have it up on my computer. Can you read it?
I surely can. Detroit seeks $50 million to fund programs under Duggan's People's Plan. So this was announced a couple of days ago, shortly after the mayor announced his bid for re-election in the year 2021. And really working closely with the executive director of the city's workforce development and job training, Nicole Freeman, who we all love here, on skilled trades, asking philanthropy to help fund folks for apprenticeships and going through skills trades and helping folks get their, high school diplomas and, all of that, even, asking for going door to door and asking for support toward this. This is a $50 million fund that he wants to create. And within the first year, I think he has already raised, I think, a couple of million dollars. He's calling it the People's Plan. And again, and I said this last week, and I'll say it today, and then I'll turn it over to you. This is the kind of stuff that wins elections. I'm telling you, this is the kind of thing that wins elections. When you've already made a splash in your announcement, which he did. He had Reverend Wendell Anthony and Bishop Charles Ellis and Marvis Cofield from Akibaline Village in his announcement, and many more powerful power brokers in the city of Detroit on that announcement. And then to follow it up with this, whomever plans on challenging him, you are already behind. Get out there and let's have a real race. Donna, I'll give it to
Plan
you.
sounds really good until you consider there's a Detroiters Bill of Rights also on the table. And it's
The
not
people's bills.
the people, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You have a Detroiters Bill of Rights that's on the table that is addressing root causes and issues that Detroiters are dealing with, whether it is the need for access to affordable water affordability, not shut off moratoriums where the clock keeps ticking, but water affordability. When you look at the fact that people need access to clean and safe air and environments, and we need to change how we do business to ensure that the health of Detroiters is protected against industrial greed. And when you look at the need for recreation and housing and other root causes, you cannot fix everything with a hammer. A hammer has one use, and it's to bang things. And, job training can do some things good, but I think that the Citizens Research Council has noted that job training as it is currently structured and more of the same is not getting at the true problems of racial inequity and injustice and poverty inside of our community. And so whenever somebody brings me a job training plan, when I say racism and you say job training, then that's telling me that you're shifting the responsibility for fixing racism onto me, as if only I could read better and had more skills, I'd be treated better by the police and I'd have housing and poverty would not exist. And so I reject that approach to supporting Detroiters. And I really hope that we are able to help him expand his thinking to incorporate what is in the Detroiters Bill of Rights, because in 2021, that's all I'm going to be talking about until it is enshrined in our city charter and our constitution. And we are not asking for favors, but we are given rights.
I haven't heard the mayor express explicit support on the People's Bill of Rights, or even talk about it, explicitly. I think that you are right, but the one thing that I would say about this is I understand everything that you're saying, and I don't disagree, but I'm wondering how this is going to be framed and how this is going to be presented, because the mayor is a master at framing and presenting things that garners support, not only from philanthropic institutions, but from people, from voters. And so,
voters I talk to, the people I talk to, the neighborhoods are talking about water bills. The folks I'm talking, it's neighborhoods that are talking about housing. And so I think that it's a one-trick pony. When FCA was built, what did we do? We put money into summer jobs, so-called. We put money into the Detroit Promise Scholarship. We put money into job training. Did people's lives get better, and were their lives protected? So in these parts of the neighborhood, people are not necessarily thinking they got what they should have gotten out of this plan. And so I think that he's running unopposed right now, as you pointed out, although the city council has put forth what I consider to be a very compelling set of rights that we'll see. Is it too difficult for people to say, I have the right to recreation? Because in the community meetings that you were in at ECN and that you sat in inside of the community, people were not saying, what we need more of? Job training. I'm not saying people didn't say they needed jobs, but I don't see job training rising to the top of people's priorities when I talk to them. And the last thing I'm gonna say on this is we have a justice problem that's affecting senior citizens. Are we gonna send them to job training? Are we gonna send disabled people to job training?
Yes,
Who
yes, they
don't have the
need,
ability to work? This
they need to go to
concept
work.
that job training is the problem, it's exactly what a neoliberal response to a community problem. But I want other people to weigh in. This is you and me, and we can go at it. And I know you agree with me. You're just trying to be I won't call you a devil's advocate, but the advocate.
No, well, I'm saying narrative is powerful, and Duggan has figured that out. That's all I'm saying. And so I don't disagree with you at all. But he's shrewd and he's cunning. I'm telling you. Yeah. But go ahead. Anybody want to weigh in on this? No.
I mean, look, narrative and messaging is everything, like you said, Orlando. And my issue really is that I'm always trying to see the connectivity between when new programs are created. We're trying to remake, many of us are in this conversation about how do we remake workforce development to make it truly equitable and to meet the needs of community. To me, when you say, and you said this earlier, when you talk about a people's plan, to me, when I hear that, and historically when I've heard that, it makes me think, okay, communities have actually helped shape this strategy and shape this plan. It plugs into existing work that's already going on in communities, because a lot of our nonprofits are already on the ground doing important work to get residents ready, but also to get residents plugged into employment opportunities. We got the Detroit Regional Partnership. We got Detroit Means Business. What's the connectivity between all of these strategies? Where is the connection point there? And I really wish, I mean, we could go back to the Black Panthers and to a number of justice organizations historically to put together people's plans. But ultimately, the ones that address the systemic issues, systemic racism and other challenges that affect our communities, those plans are often not lifted up in the context of all the structures and all the programs that we've created. Until we can address structural racism in a real way in Detroit, who holds power, who doesn't hold power, to me, a lot of these programs are going to be challenged to actually really meet the needs of communities if we don't address those underlying issues, as you said, Don. So that's my feeling about it, and just how we need to just question this and figure out what we're already supporting. How does this connect into that work, and where is the people's voice?
Well, and I think it speaks to the center, which is what the Democratic Party has always done, and what we heard right after the election, right, was don't go too left, don't speak to those who are too progressive. And so talking about workforce development and job training and things like that speaks right to the middle. So I'm not surprised to hear that this is what he's pushing right now.
And I think it's interesting to see the influence of corporate into this space, right? So philanthropy has kind of pushed the needle in a lot of different ways, sometimes, in ways that hasn't been helpful. But it's interesting to see corporate starting to get into the philanthropic space and to see what their agendas are. And I think that this kind of lends itself to one of them. In addition to that, I'm always curious about workforce and how we're thinking about the future. I think that it's a lot of companies, it's a lot of organizations that's based on old models. We need to start thinking about what the future of Detroit is going to be, and until we can have a substantive conversation about what that is, how do we create a plan around that conversation when we don't even know what that's going to be? So, just interesting to see how this is shaping out.
I mean, I had the same thoughts that Kevin mentioned when I heard about it, which is, where is the community in a people's plan for Detroit? But everything you all said, and particularly your point, Orlando, about narrative, I mean, this is the type of thing that's appealing right now. You talk about trying to get people back to work. You highlight, eliminating poverty. it has all of the things that are attractive, particularly when you want to get, kind of rally your troops, would be corporate and philanthropy.
Well, I mean, if he's trying to generate funds for his campaign, that plan is definitely the way to do it.
Mhm.
I still believe that I'm not as optimistic that his narrative is working as well with bread and butter voters as we think it is. I think it's actually moved, and I think that people have overinterpreted the success of Proposal N to see this to say this is a referendum on his popularity, on his ability for narrative. I think that's just a thing. Proposal N was we're going to tear down houses. Nobody else had any other ideas. It ran against itself because nobody had a proposal A versus a proposal N. It was a proposal N, and that was it. But I do believe that there is a groundswell of concern about the New Detroit versus the Detroit most people live in, the two Detroits, and the feeling that money is not being invested properly. And I believe that a candidate who chooses to lift up those issues could possibly challenge that narrative, which does sound good, especially in some ways, and poke the holes that deserve poking into that narrative. How much money have we put into job training? That has been his focus for how long? Our Detroiters were better off as a result of all of this job training investment. And I'm not anti-job training at all. I'm anti-bad job training programs and job training programs where people don't get helped. I used to run a nonprofit where we had some job training dollars, and you could see the disconnect between what we were spending to train people and what they were actually getting when they left. So I'm a little bit cynical about doing that. I agree there are some better initiatives around getting people to work. We worked on trying to get people to work and people didn't have housing. We worked and tried to get people to work and they didn't have, they needed some mental health care because there's so many issues that people are dealing with. And I don't think it's as simple as a training program. I think that we've got to help stabilize people, help them manage their trauma so that many people can get to the point of going to work and trying to find a job.
Yep. Or the news frames it for Detroiters who felt left behind or left out. Donna, you make a strong point. Was right there alongside you when we launched our our economic security, economic development program for, what do we call it? Partnership for Economic Independence. And we found that in addition to the job people needed, people had, so many other issues before we can even get them into, a training program or to get them job placement or to get, it's a lot. It's a lot. So I'm interested to see where this goes. And I'm still interested to see who may come out and challenge Duggan for 2021. I can't wait. I can't wait to see it. All right. Maybe a Black woman will step up to the plate. Y'all think Detroit ready for that? Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Wait, is Detroit ready for that? Detroit ready for that?
Is Detroit? I said, is Detroit ready for a Black woman mayor? That was the question.
I don't know. I think it's very hard to beat an incumbent. To me, what I'm hopeful about is, I've talked to some different organizations. I really think that there has to be sort of a comprehensive platform of issues that are presented to the mayor, to any other candidates, and to all city council candidates to see how they really stand on more progressive issues. Because I think, as Meredith said, this constant, I'll be honest with you, the infighting in the Democratic Party is really annoying to me. Both sides are annoying to me. Because the day after the election, we didn't even know the full results. You have the representative for Virginia, who's a more moderate, saying, if it wasn't for this defund the police conversation, we would have won more seats. And then you have Ocasio-Cortez saying, if it wasn't for the weak message of the moderates, look, your party is of the left. You got to find a way to speak to people across the left, because that's who makes up the party. And you can't win without one side or the other. But I do think that in this city, we need to really present a progressive platform and ask all candidates to answer to this, to see where they stand on these issues. And I think if groups can come together and build that platform, it's a very short window to do that. But I think if groups could do that, I want to see where people really stand on these issues. And I want that reported. I want to hear where we stand in a place in a city that still has not answered to this question about defunding the police. We still haven't really answered that question about where we go on that issue. We've talked a lot about equitable development, and what does that actually mean in practice? If we have a number of people, we have all talked about this before in some setting or another. If we have all these people who are in need of housing, who earn less than 50% of area median income, and we're barely meeting the needs of that group, what's the disruption to actually address that? I want to hear from the candidates to see if they have real ideas about how to do it, or as you were saying, Donna, is it just the same strategies or same plans? Or Nate, you were saying it's outdated, some of these outdated strategies. Is it the same old, same old? We need new ideas.
Well, we have the Detroiters Bill of Rights. I shared with you in your comments. I don't know if you've looked at them. It's a starting point to me. Let's look at what people have put together, because a lot of progressive people did come together around that. I sat in as many meetings as I could, and I got meetinged out, but I stand behind it. You have two city council people, Raquel Castaneda Lopez introduced it and had her staff working really hard on it. And so I know that it's been a pretty inclusive process. Now, I'm not saying that's everything. It doesn't deal with economic development. It doesn't deal with that. And I agree with you. We need something broader and bigger that embraces everybody. But I think that for me, it starts, if we're going to have an equitable city, it starts with enshrining the rights of people who are most easily written off into our city charter and saying, you know what, you don't have the right, no matter what you do, to get around these people. I don't want to hogtie development. I'm all about development. I love seeing new things. There's ways that other cities have done it. You have in Atlanta and Minnesota, you have actual housing plans, housing vision, where they said, this is what housing should look like in our city. I don't have the answers, but I just am concerned that the city has not sought out the answers in any meaningful way. Why don't we have a Detroit Housing 2030 that outlines how Detroit, what is the need, what is the gap, and how do we get there? And let's try some new things. It's not going to be all home ownership, okay? Everybody's not going to qualify for a mortgage. It's just not going to happen. So we need to have, and Detroit Future City, others have been putting some things together, but I think the city needs to drive that and just decide that we have a plan for an equitable future in our community. And I would love to see that from any mayoral candidate. I actually had an opportunity to share with Mayor Duggan directly a couple of weeks ago exactly where I stood on that, and also my concern that the moratorium was not sufficient, because with the moratorium, the clock keeps ticking. And when that moratorium ends, if you haven't paid your bill, you can still be shut off. Now, I know the goal is to make it permanent with philanthropy and with state and federal funding. And I don't know if philanthropy wants to get into paying water bills. Maybe that's a good way to segue into another conversation. Do you see that being a role for philanthropy to make water affordable?
I could say from the Knight Foundation, no. Primarily, what we deal in is public space. We deal in news and journalism, and we deal in technology and innovation. So that will be a strong departure from what we hang our hats on. And to do something that was that radical of a shift, it would have to have significant buy-in from everybody, to the point where it was almost a reputational risk to not be involved in it. But just on its face, I don't see us going in that direction.
And I would say maybe the systemic approaches to the water issue around like lead pipe replacements or structured, payment systems or something like that, but just to pay water bills or provide water. It's like where does it end, right? And you don't get at the root of the problem, which I think is where we really need to be putting our attention and our funding. And when I say our, I mean taxpayer dollars, I mean city, state, national, I mean all of that energy needs to go into the root cause, not just paying the bills. And philanthropy has done that. Philanthropy has paid bills. We all fund thaw to some extent. We provide water and water filters for food pantries and things like that, which is great. But at the end of the day, it's not getting to why we have this issue to begin with.
Yeah, I think the design would be really important. And so clearly, at least in my opinion, there's a real equity issue there. Mm-hmm. And it's one that we would have interest in trying to eradicate. I think it's all about how it is. You're right. We're not just, wouldn't think that we would just be paying bills, but if there's like a fund that's created to address this issue, if we're supporting an activity to change, what we have said has historically been, inequitable, that's the kind of thing I feel like there could be a role for us, and there should be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think in the short term, that's something we could do. But I think when I first got here, I remember one of the reporters at Crane's Business asked me if I thought that because the city relied so much on philanthropy to really cover gaps, did that prevent us from funding innovative strategies and practices? And I had to think about it. I told her, well, I just got here. I can't answer that question, but I'll come back and we can talk about that at some other point. I think what Meredith said is spot on for me. I think we could do something to help in the short term, but it would have to be, this is why I advocate foundations to support organizing and advocacy work, because if we're going to change the systemic nature of any of these issues, we have to have the people power at the table, and we have to have a legislative agenda, administrative changes that could be made at the state and city level or county level that could really address whether we're talking about water shutoffs or tax foreclosures in the long term. I think we have to support organizations on the ground, like We the People of Detroit and other groups that are doing this hard work. They're doing the research. They're really setting the tone for what we could do differently. But we have to pay attention to that, and we have to fund organizing and advocacy at a much higher level to really have the impact that we'd like to see.
Because ultimately, the city should be looking at the research they've already done and try to figure out how do we implement this, rather than, starting from scratch. There's a lot of brilliant people who've been at this. Monica Lewis Patrick is a hero of, everybody who cares about this issue. And so let's lift her up and let her help solve the problems. And that's where I think her energy has gone into the Bill of Rights, because she believes that she's got to enshrine it in a document. And that's, one of the reasons why I really support that is because of the people I know who've been, trying to make sure that we protect people from political ebbs and flows. So, Orlando, what else is going on? I know you have some.
We wanted to put a button on the year with friends to talk about, some big moments for Detroit and the nation, and we want to look ahead to next year. And so we have, some questions for our friends as we begin to ponder about this year, but, get excited, looking forward to next year. And so this was the year of big moments, right? So many of us have had and experienced big moments. And I'm wondering for everybody, like, can you remember your first big moment of 2020? What was the big moment, your first big moment in 2020 that just had you celebrating, that had you maybe the opposite of that in deep grief, the big moment, and going back to January of 2020. So we learned that I know one of Meredith and Kevin's big moments was that they were on Authentically Detroit in February.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew it. I knew it. That was one of my. That was
huge.
That was a top 10 moment. Top 10 moment.
Top 10, yeah. But it was great.
I was wearing a mask.
You were.
That was like the first time I wore a mask in public was during that podcast.
Yep.
That is true. You
Yep.
were sitting
But it
like trying
wasn't-
to sit across the room
Yep.
and
You had traveled to Atlanta or something, right? And gotten sick.
I came back from Atlanta on Valentine's Day and I was sick as a dog. And so I had these masks because I didn't want to stop working. And I felt like, well, if I wear a mask, then I can keep working and I won't make other people sick because Orlando was threatening me. And so I was afraid to come into the office without, face coverings.
Y'all keep that.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. First big moment of the year, Sarida. What comes to mind for you? What comes up for you?
It was probably January. We hold these grantee cafes. That's historically something we've done. And I had just started in December of 2019. So the one in January was my first kind of introduction to actually almost everyone, the staff, our team, the grantees. And we had a new office that we spent very little time in, but that was probably the first thing I remember about 2020 is just thinking about kicking off the year, being in a totally new, sector, new line of work.
Oh, wow, I can't believe it's been a year already. Nate Wallace, first big moment of the year.
Man, so I'm gonna go the opposite way. So Marlo passing was the year for me. That was tough. That was a tough one. Somebody that we had just got back from my bachelor party not too long ago that we did in London, just had the wedding, he was a big part of all of that. And then just, February when nobody knew exactly what was going on. One of our last texts is him setting up the meeting with Orlando Bailey and Donna Gibbons. You got to meet my crew. You got to meet my people. So that really, not being able to grieve him, not being able to mourn him, not being able to celebrate him in the way that he needed to be celebrated. But then being able to kind of put that energy into advocating for the city, that has propelled a lot of the things that I've done this year, and it's all stemming from that, so to me, this, that was just the biggest thing headline for my 2020.
What I remember about that is that the meeting that we ended up having, he sent a text to all
He
of
was
us
texting
saying
us.
he had been diagnosed with pneumonia.
Yep.
And we thought we didn't understand what it meant.
Yep.
And so that's.
I know.
Yeah, it's tough.
I know it's tough. It's still tough.
Kevin,
what about you?
I mean, Marlo, that was a big piece of it. It actually was the week before, I was actually in the Bay Area at a neighborhood funders group conference where we were talking about the connection between health and housing. And it was a group of funders who support equitable development with health conversion funders and others. And it was this amazing session because we reached this point where we had those funders interested in supporting organizing and advocacy work that connected the two issues. And literally I came back and 2 days later was when I found out Marlo was in the hospital. And I'd just seen him a couple weeks before that. So coming off this great moment where we had this breakthrough and we felt like, man, we've made some progress and we can move forward on these issues. And then I had a meeting scheduled with him and one of the CDOs literally the week after that, and then I found out he was in the hospital. So that what Meredith and Nate talked about earlier with this sort of highs and lows, it just felt like that it was always something where something good was happening and then something happened like that. A month later, we were building out the CDO fund and everything was coming together with that. And then my favorite aunt passed away. So it was just constantly this kind of up and down for me. So it's hard to separate those great moments from the tragic moments that all of us have dealt with this year.
We all have dealt with it. Meredith, did we have an opportunity to hear from you?
No, I mean, I think it's pretty much the same as, all of you have stated, just a sense of loss and grieving and, trying to stay balanced within it all. And I think for me, just having two teenagers, the very first conversation around grief and loss happened in January when Kobe Bryant and his daughter and all the, folks that were in the helicopter with them died. And it was just like, wow. So that was like the kickoff grief conversation for 2020 for me, with two teenagers. And it just progressed through the year with family members and friends and neighbors and other celebrities and people, that they admired, passing this year. That just it's just been the moment. The moment for me in 2020 was having these grief and faith and loss conversations, and the importance of loving when we can and while we can.
Loving, checking in, like Meredith and I we've been checking in all year.
Yeah.
Just to check in.
That's
Donna,
right.
how about you, Donna?
Well, Marlo was a huge moment.
Yeah.
So that was for sure. But then a couple months later, I got married, and that was another huge moment. That was on the positive side. So, it's interesting that, being, sheltering in place with somebody when you're newlywed, either it's going to go really, really well.
You don't find out.
Horrible. It's like, okay, we were put through every test, but I can just say that we passed that test with flying colors. So that's been good.
Oh man, that's so funny. You gonna find out if you like your spouse for real in these times.
True.
Yeah.
True.
It's been great.
Yeah.
Orlando came over for dinner.
Yeah, I can see it's good. It's all good over there. The Davidsons. I think my first big moment. There were a lot of big moments, but I'll leave from one that still brings me joy. I got back from the Marshall Memorial Fellowship in late 2019, like November 2019, and we of course had to do something to tell the world about our experience. And so Yodie Mesvin Johnson and I got together and decided that we were going to put on a consulate talk back around the Marshall Memorial experience. And we invited Kirk Mays and Marlo Stoudemire to host it. And man, it was a time. It was, Marlo, first off, so 2019 was my second try at the Marshall Memorial Fellowship, and I got it. I went out for it in 2018 and didn't get it. And Marlo, I don't know who he cussed out because he was livid that I didn't get into 18, but I'm glad I got it in 19. And so when we decided that we were going to, do the event, him and Kirk both, they were so adamant about being there and talking about it. This small group of Detroiters who've been able to go really on this, amazing experience. And Marlo and Kirk were really the ones for me having those conversations as I got ready to apply and within the application process and right before I left. And following after them as one of the few Black males from Detroit who has been able to go. He said to me, he was like, I cannot wait to meet you on the other side of this. And I don't know like what's going to happen. I don't know what's in store, but it's going to be dope. And so of course he had not had the opportunity to hear about my recent movement from EC in the Bridge and some of the other amazing things that's happening. But for me, that's a sweet spot because we were able, my first big moment in 2019 was really being able to share space and story and inspire Black folks around, transatlantic engagement, realizing that we are Black all over the world. That was the name of the event. And, sharing that space with Deep Johnson, Kirk Mays, and Marlo, it was magic. I just, I felt so privileged to be in that space. So yeah, that was a really profound moment for me. You guys have already talked about, so much loss, particularly in our friend and brother, my mentor, big bro, Marlo. But, COVID-19 sort of, also laid bare all of the inequities and disparities that Black people experience in this country. Early on in the pandemic, we knew and we found out that Black folks were disproportionately infected with COVID. And Detroit being the largest majority Black city in America, whatever is happening in Black America, you can almost always get a snapshot of that in the city of Detroit. Case in point, Detroit was an early hotspot for coronavirus. How do you guys reconcile those facts with the work that you are doing and the initiatives and things that you are funding? Kevin, we'll start with you.
Yeah, this year was a very interesting year because it's hard for me to also to separate COVID from the aftermath of George Floyd's murder and the racial reckoning, because I think they're deeply connected. And one of the things that was helpful for me this year was that a couple of years ago, we instituted this process for providing what we call expedited grants to organizations. So they're smaller grants we can get out the door. Technically we can move them quicker, but it was a way to fund a number of grassroots organizations in 2020 that were what I would consider frontline organizations, along with CDOs and organizing groups and other groups. But these resources really help those organizations to get water and other necessities and basics to people. So having that tool to be able to get resources out was extremely helpful. And then, there were a lot of funds created to support the work. So we contributed to the support, the fund for small businesses that New Economy Initiative put together. And we actually supported a number of artists and arts or small grassroots arts organizations through Culture Source. And there were a number of grants that we made to support that kind of work. So the underlying thing I think that was most helpful to me was that our president, Darren Walker, realized that we were going to need some additional resources in the next couple of years. And of course, not knowing how the stock market might perform and how a lot of our foundations the performance in the stock market really can hinge on how much money we spend. We did roll out these 2 social justice bonds, and we're able to access additional resources that will help us, not only helped us this year, but also will help us next year as well. So I feel like that it was a great opportunity for us to step up and to really, for me to share with my colleagues, because most of our work is national and global in context, about the importance of place-based grant making and getting resources closest to in communities and on the ground as possible. And I felt like we did a pretty good job of doing that this year.
Before we move on, can I just ask you about that huge investment Ford made in arts and cultural organizations across the nation?
Yeah, so this is one of those situations where, and I can't explain why this happened. Part of it, of course, was the social justice bond grants that we made, but Darren is a big lover of the arts, and particularly people of color-led arts organizations, and trying to find ways to better support those groups. So this was a strategy that they had been discussing about in this moment of crisis for so many arts organizations. The ones that are often the hardest hit are ones led by people of color, or that are specific to communities of color. So they launched the America's Treasures Grants Program with funding partners, because that's the other piece about this, is that Ford can't do this work alone. If we're going to do something, we really want to figure out how we can do this with other funding partners. And so, Darren and Margaret Morton, who leads our free creativity and free expression work. I give them a lot of credit for really helping to broker those relationships. And as a result, we were able to make a significant contribution to the Wright Museum to really help them through this very challenging time. But we had a number of grant programs like that that rolled out. We had one for disability justice that rolled out this year. Disability has been a weakness of our equity grant making portfolio. So we launched that and were able to support a number of groups through that work, including Detroit Disability Justice. So yeah, so I'm glad you asked about that. I just, again, just feeling blessed that leadership has been thinking about those issues in better ways to support groups through different mechanisms within the foundation.
Sarida, what about you? We'd love to hear from you because you are, sort of on the front lines and just how outspoken you are about a lot of these issues, especially, around the inequities and disparities that Black folks face in this city. How, earlier on in the year, how were you reconciling what you were seeing with what you were funding and supporting?
So I'll be honest, and some of the people on this podcast right now know I struggled early on when this all started, partly because to make a move where you've been in a position where for so long, one, you could make decisions, and two, you knew exactly where you were needed to be in a new role, and then to have a pandemic in the city that I just absolutely love, and to feel like you don't know what to do. It was so frustrating to me. And that now that I didn't know how to move levers because I hadn't been there long enough. So that was the thing. People needed money. And when you're in the, philanthropy, part of it is just knowing how to get shit done. It's not always about the process, it's knowing, and I didn't know how to get it done. And that was very difficult for me because that was the whole point. We needed to get money out. And as Kevin mentioned, different organizations have different ways of getting it done fast. And I was like, I don't know how to make it happen fast. And I was mad because I was like, if I was a city, I know exactly where they need me, what I could do, where I'd have to go. So it took me a long time. And then we're also all dealing with the challenges, and you all have mentioned, the way I found out about Marla, it all was so much. And so finally, being able to figure it out, it got much better for me later in the summer. And I, as I was telling people, I hadn't even been able to make any grants. I was still that new. And so finally getting to this point of feeling like you understand why you're in your role and what you can do, that's been great. And I'm still, leaning into it and learning how to, leverage my colleagues and understanding how you can utilize this kind of peer pressure, like, oh yeah, they're funding this and this is like really good. And, this is how, that all is taking some time, but I'm looking forward to this opportunity. As I told someone, and you all know, Donna and Orlando, working at a nonprofit, you work hard. Because you love it. So I tell people, yeah, I'm good. We talk about, giving out money is a challenge I can work with. So I can make it work. I'm fine. People always ask, how you doing? So that piece is going much better.
Oh man, I love it. Meredith, I love the relationship that how you describe your relationship with your grantees. You call them grant partners, and I've seen firsthand how transparent and how that relationship is between Fisher Foundation and the grant partners. And of course, these grant partners are on the ground, making it happen. When when the junk hit the fan, like what were those conversations like? And how did you all pivot to continue to support those grant partners?
I think, really early on, it was clear that all of us stay home. Like staying home to work is a luxury. And for a lot of folks, our people, they can't stay home. Yep. And they were missing very basic things like masks. You know what I mean? Like just, early on, it was kind of like, where's the PPE? And we heard stories of, folks buying masks for outrageous prices, on the corner, whatever. And it was like, we need to go back to some very basic things like buying masks and distributing them in the community and getting them out. And it was just really, you know, like, I think there were a lot of big plans, you know, for big activities and big grants, and which we ended up doing too. But very early on, it was very clear that the inequities, the disparity is our people aren't working from home, and they need to be protected when they have to go out to work, when they have to get on the bus, when they have to, you know, travel, just go about their daily lives. And so that was a very key conversation very early on. And I'm happy to say we responded. It didn't take much convincing to, you know, to make that happen. So that was one thing. Another thing was just kind of supporting those small businesses. Like one of the areas where Fisher has been supportive for many years is in the early childhood space. And those early child care businesses, those women, they were like, what do we do when we don't have kids? We can't get the state reimbursement. We can't, you know, get the private pay because people are not going to work or whatever. And so providing that stopgap funding for those businesses so they could at least survive to figure out how they're going to function long term. And so I'm really proud of that response, and the fact that, again, we didn't have to like convince and, you know, do backflips in order to make some very key things happen early on.
Yeah, that's great. What about you, Nate?
Yeah, so really the same thing that Meredith said. The first thing we did was move all programmatic grants to operational support. That was the first thing that we did immediately, just to relieve some pressure. Then two, I think, you know, to Sarida's point, you know, being new, you know, has its own challenges. Knowing what levers to pull.
Too.
Yeah, knowing what levers to pull. My leadership got to know me quicker than I anticipated them to get to know me. You know what I'm saying? So being able to having to advocate for the city under urgency, you know, is a very different conversation. You know, it's a very different conversation. So so in addition to moving those grants to operational, we did something that we never did before. We funded health and safety. You know, we got into general health services, you know, which is something that we've never done before. And then we make sure that our arts and culture community had what they needed, who's in our pipeline to make it, you know. So in addition to all that as well, I think that this having to create, because I'm new, having to create strategy in the middle of this moment was beneficial. It was beneficial. It was beneficial because it cut through a lot of the clutter that a lot of people before me had to deal with. So when you're talking about DI and having to deal with going through, you know, code words and everything like that, we got rid of that. You know, now we're talking about equity. You know, now we're talking about Black people. You know, we're not talking about, you know, we're not talking about minorities and this and that. We're talking about Black people in Detroit. You know, so we was able to have a really clear focus. We was able to create strategy that was very specific. And, you know, and this is the strategy, and this is and being able to create during this period, and it's going to inform our work going forward. So I was grateful that we was able to create strategy during this period in time.
I would be remiss if I didn't add, I talked about myself. As a foundation, we did a lot of the same things. We changed up our grants. We have also, like Ford, increased our payout. And I was very happy because I was being really vocal around Foundation of Bob before I even knew exactly, like, we gotta get some money out. So it's been good to see. And like Nate said, we're taking advantage of this moment to really lean into it. Like, you know, I'm new, but I was still like, how are you gonna not let me do a general operating grant? How can I not? How am I gonna ask somebody to stick to a program in a time like this? So, you know, taking this opportunity to be like, this is what we need to be doing, it was how.
Yeah.
Orlando, can I just add one more thing too? I have to talk about also behind the scenes. Our grants manager did an unbelievable job this past year. I mean, he was processing the Detroit grants, our states working group grants, and our Just Cities and Regions grants. He was processing hundreds of grants in the first 2 quarters of the year. And he did an amazing, we were trying to hit a 75% mark of getting grants out the door in the first 2 quarters. This was before the year started. That was the goal because we knew it was going to be an election year. We were going to focus on election administration and other things. We want to get that out the door. Well, on top of those grants, now you're talking about other grants we have 4 different grant programs that got piled on top of that, and he got it done this year. Casey Stafford did an amazing job for our team. So you see us out front doing this work, but behind the scenes, there's all these people on our team who are doing the work and getting things done to make sure that things continue to run and we get that money out the door. Because the processes, particularly for national philanthropy, the processes are, I've got to get it to my director, to the VP, to compliance and legal and all that. And the grants manager guides that process to get all the things done, to get it on Darren's desk, to sign it and get it out the door. So I would be remiss if I did not mention the incredible work he did this year.
Shout out to Casey. Dinner's on us when we can regather. I want to talk about milestones in 2021 because I think 3 of you have a significant milestone coming up. But before we go to 2021, I want to talk about the election in the wake of the racial reckoning that we were going through or are going through as a country, and this modern day global civil rights movement in the wake of George Floyd, and then the presidential election, kind of rolling in. So we got Sarida Scott here, and so we got to ask her. Sarida was at the Central County Board, counting the votes, tabulating the votes, but also was very outspoken in protecting the votes when we talk about the Wayne County Board of Canvassers and the state Board of Canvassers. Sarida, talk about your experience with democracy this year.
It was really unexpected. I've said I just love elections. I work every presidential election, voter protection, challenger. It's just, I like being involved that way. And so I did it again this year. I wasn't planning, I wasn't even scheduled to be at TCF. There was a bunch of people in this city, as you know, Detroit put out the call, we needed poll workers. And so a bunch of friends put together this Facebook, group. I woke up early, the day after election day, just like, because we all knew there was not going to be a decision. I checked it and people were like, there's busloads of Republicans who had come down to TCF. And I was just like, you need somebody else? And they said, come. I tell people this is the most eye-opening thing. I have never experienced anything like it. But the other thing it made me think, there's so many issues we could talk about on this, but the one big thing is that we have always put so much effort into getting out the vote. This whole feeling like, people don't come out to vote. We need people to come out to vote. I never, in all the years I've done this, thought that we also had to put so much effort to protecting the vote. Wow. I have never seen this much effort to disenfranchise people in my lifetime, in the time I've done that. I'm telling you, the stuff I saw there and the way I reacted, people were like, I didn't know you were like that. It's just, it was a whole different experience. but it was, and just, I was like, I learned a lot about what we have to do every step, but also it's frustrating because I was telling somebody I shouldn't have had to be there. I shouldn't have had to do the kinds of things we did and the stuff we said to people, because, you should be able to feel like you go and vote and you allow people to count it, and whoever wins, wins. But that's not where we are right now in this country.
Wow. And, during the Wayne County Board of Canvassers vote, Ned Stabler made, national headlines for the speech that he made to the Board of Canvassers, but not to, disparage Ned. We love Ned, but Sarida Scott also gave.
She brought the fire. She didn't speak that long, but it was just powerful. Mm-hmm. Yes, that was great.
You know how horrible it was? We were on that 6 hours.
I know. I was covering it.
And that's and it was so tense. My child was going, she came home, she's like, you're still in this meeting? And I was like, I haven't had a chance to speak. I mean, you felt all of that. But the sad thing is, you know, since that time, I gave an affidavit to the ACLU. I spoke on the state one. The sad thing is, I was asked to also speak at the state, you know, there was a committee meeting last week. And after we saw what happened to our Secretary of State and to Representative Johnson, the ACLU asked us not to speak. That is so angering to me.
It's real.
That here you are, we just want to talk, right? We just want to talk about what actually happened. And they were so concerned about the safety of everyone who was supposed to speak that they just shut it down. What is going on? That's the kind of thing that's just so, you know, frustrating and angry about all of this.
I mean, yes, it's a different time, and you know, being a part of, you know, journalism organization that's covering this with, you know, a nuance, but you know, really clear points of view. We've also been the object of the same kind of, you know, death threats and, you know, comments. Apparently, I'm a part of the Grosse Pointe Antifa. They got me on video with the Grosse Pointe Antifa, so I didn't know I was a part of it, but it really is, you know, a different time, and we have to take all of those threats seriously and report them to the authorities, you know, to be, you know, investigated. And it's something that, you know, I was there with you, Sarida, at the Central Counting Board. I've never experienced it. I've never have been threatened for, you know, doing my job. And, you know, how do you reconcile that with family? Like, do I tell my mama that I'm going through this? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think so, because she's going to worry, she's going to go crazy, and she can't do anything about it. And I'm not worried about it, right? It's just a crazy time. The other crazy thing that happened, Kevin, Tanya Allen from the Skillman Foundation says she's leaving Skillman.
Before we go to that,
I was gonna say, could I did want to say something.
Oh, go for it.
Yeah.
Go for it.
So I just wanted to say, this is the kind of thing that can only happen one way in America. I close my eyes and I imagine a Black person in Grosse Pointe banging on the walls and saying, still, this is a fraud. I can't imagine doing that for more than 5 minutes before somebody had me in handcuffs. Legit. We endured a summer of people protesting, getting wrist zip tied, tear gas, rubber bullets, all of that happening, getting arrested for disorderly conduct. There were some people marching down Gratiot, and the police used some boxer move, box them in and get them, and for breaking a curfew. But when people were downtown at TCF threatening, disrupting voting rights, lying, being disorderly, the same police chief that mapped out the boxer move said they had a right to speak. And then to add insult to injury, said that they were able to get some protesters who were down there trying to inflame the situation. They were able to get them under control. So my question is, I felt completely unprotected by our government, because I'm pretty sure the Grosse Pointe police protect Grosse Pointers. The Detroit police should have protected a process in our community. And I don't care if they stood around, they could have hauled them out just like they did other people. But we live in a world where some people have the right to do whatever in hell they want to do. They can lie to the courts, they can file false lawsuits, and everybody just says, "Ooh, what do you think is going to happen? Ooh, I wonder if they're going to recognize that they lost." And, you know, there's no fidelity to the truth. So I am really, really angry at the injustice, the hypocrisy, and the failure to hold people. So when I hear people say, let's figure out why they're so angry, in a minute, they're going to need to figure out why we're so angry, because that's the wrong question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, that's exactly how I felt. That's exactly what got me up that morning, because we all know how we all feel about the church. I was like, you think you're going to come on a bus in our city and try and disenfranchise our votes? How dare you? And it's going on for weeks. And that's exactly how I felt too. I was talking to police like, what are you doing? This is illegal. And we can have an entire podcast to talk about this, just how racism has, you know, even the way, like you said, the police responded. They weren't there protecting us. And why? And why have we had to deal with all of this? And let me stop before I start getting too crazy.
We'll do that. We'll have you back. We're going to
We
talk
gotta
about
have Sarida back because I was on the phone with Donna, like, yo, who could we call to come down here? My east side came out, like, yo.
because he wants to call his boys. I'm like, oh, let me figure out who I can call because Lord knows we can't call the police. I'm sorry, Kevin, you had something.
No, I just, the thing that I think is troubling to me is that a lot of what happened during the election cycle and then post-election was predicted by the ACLU of Michigan and a number of these groups that were doing election administration work. These groups, there was 30 plus groups around that table, NAACP, others, who planned for months and months and months about what could happen, what was the potential to happen. They were trying to set up all the scenarios and figure out how to support and structure things correctly. Safe Voting Project poured millions of dollars into Michigan to support the clerk's work and outreach and everything else to try to protect folks and make sure that when people went to vote, they were safe and able. All these things were set up. Millions of dollars were spent in the state. More money was poured into Michigan than almost any other state for the protections pre and post election. And even with all of that money, because this is going above and beyond what happens during a normal presidential cycle, we still had these things play out in Michigan. And it wasn't until this week that Representative Mitchell said, I can no longer be a part of the Republican Party. You mean after all the things, we could go back to May when the governor was threatened, that someone threatened to kidnap and murder the governor of the state of Michigan. People went up to the state capitol with guns and Confederate flags, and these Republican representatives did not say a thing about. In fact, as the president continued to attack our governor, the Republican leadership stayed silent. So even after months of all this, after the final challenge was lost, now Representative Mitchell says, well, I can no longer be a part of this party. It's disgraceful. We are a national disgrace in this state, and we have to do better. And if it means we have to create a lot of changes to protect people and to support people in our communities, then we're just gonna have to do that. But this was, to me, when I had to present to our national team when we were doing an election debrief last week, and when I actually looked back and went over all of the things that took place in this state from the kidnap plot on, it's just disgraceful. It was painful to revisit all these things, to hear what Sarida and our friend, and a shout out to Kalia Burke-Gaston, what she said went on there, and the kind of nonsense that's happened in this state. And if we can't take the time to remake politics in this state over the next decade, I'm fearful of what will happen in our next presidential cycle and what we're gonna have to deal with.
It's really something. It really is. 2021.
We're going to talk about Tanya.
Oh yeah, let's pivot.
And so I want to hear two things. I want to hear about the Black philanthropy, the way you support each other through this, because I listened to you talk about your work, and it's like a black hole to me. I have no idea what you do. I'm listening to Kevin talk about everything. It sounds like a real estate closing every time you have a grant. And from my standpoint, it's like, and I think the process and the complexity of foundation work is lost on people. So whenever there's a friend who comes to a foundation, people want that money right now. It's like, okay, you're there, you like me, you like what I'm doing. And so it seems like you have a support network that keeps you going. And so can you talk about that? And then also, what is the impact of Tanya Allen moving to Minneapolis on the support network that you guys have formed?
Oh, sorry, my cue. Yes. So let me just first say this. I've had the pleasure of working with McKnight over the years. I think McKnight is one of the best foundations in the Midwest. They support racial equity, lead with that. And I think it's a great fit. I think it's actually a perfect fit for Tanya. And I'm really, really happy for her. And I'm happy for Minneapolis, because I think Minneapolis is probably the most progressive city, major city in the Midwest. And this will give Tanya an opportunity to really lead around racial equity, she got a great team of folks over there. So I think I just want to start with that, because I do think that it's important to talk about that she's going to a place that after the George Floyd murder, where they've been leading around real transformation there and pushing the police department and defunding the police and rethinking that whole thing. Nick Knight works in all the workforce, all these different areas of climate, all these different areas, and do incredible work there. So I think it's going to be great. And I think she's going to do some work there that's going to be on the cutting edge and leading nationally that we should look to. Now, the question for me is this. Tanya said in her interview with Cranes that she's going to an institution where she can lead around racial equity. We're losing a great Black leader in philanthropy in this city. How does philanthropy respond to this? She's going to be leading this incredible work and out front on these things in Minneapolis. What do we need to think through about how we approach racial justice in this city, and how we need to do work differently in this city in philanthropy if we really are going to meet these needs that exist here? So to me, that's something we all, if you are not asking yourself that in philanthropy right now, then you're not really interested in creating real change in this city. And my concern is, Tanya was a great leader in philanthropy. She sat at a lot of important tables in this city to really move work both in an inside and an outside way. And losing her leadership in these spaces is going to be extremely challenging.
And I'd say, reading the article, it kind of, I had the same question, Kevin. She has to lead Detroit to lead on racial equity and philanthropy. I don't know if she meant it that way, or if it's just, we just don't have the support that we need in Detroit philanthropy, where, our philanthropic leaders feel like they can lead in racial equity in this city from a philanthropic seat. But that's a question for us in Southeast Michigan to answer. Like, are we really leading in philanthropy using a racial equity lens? And so, but I will say that the support that I feel like I get is from this group here. And not to look like cliquish, but we kind of came up with this little group because, first of all, we needed a place to vent. I needed a place to vent. Everybody needs a place to vent. We needed a place to kind of tell jokes that were kind of, inside jokes that someone else would get. And we needed places to share where we didn't have to convince someone to come on board. We didn't have to wait for people to feel like they wanted to collaborate, or they wanted to hear us, or they wanted to learn about something. And I would say that this has actually helped me tremendously, especially during 2020, right? With the isolation and with just kind of all the chaos and the things going on, having a safe place to come has really meant a lot to me. But it's not, I won't say it, I don't think it's not usual. It's not something that you really find in philanthropy. I haven't in the years that I've worked here, but I'm very much appreciative of it.
I actually take comfort in knowing that foundation professionals and funders, particularly Black folk in philanthropy, are really talking to each other in meaningful ways. That's really great. When I first came home from school and got into this work, I did not see that happening. I didn't see this happening. And so this is dope to witness and to see. I love it, man. 2021, y'all. So somebody been lying these last 2 days to me about some big birthday milestones that folks are looking forward to in 2021. So Nate, you got some news for us? Nate, you got anything you want to share?
Something I don't know. What you talk about, man? I ain't got nothing to share.
Meredith,
Come on now.
what's happening
Baby.
next year?
I'm proud. Okay, I will say it. So it's as part of our, biweekly check-ins, we found out that we are all like Meredith, Kevin, Sarida, we are all turning 50 within 30 days of each other, starting in January 6th, Kevin. 4th, sorry. January 4th for Kevin, the 19th for me, and February 2nd for Sarida. So within 30 days of one another, we're all going to hit the big 50. And, when you hit that half century mark, you start getting a little reflective. You start reflecting a little bit. And so, the Marvin Gaye "What's Going On" album dropped in 1971, right?
Come on.
Think about that. And so the songs, "What's Going On," "Mercy, Mercy Me," things ain't what they used to be, right? "Inner City Blues," "Makes Me Want to Holler." Those are all questions that we are like
to this day
asking like crazy this year. And so anyway, so I am going into 50 with my friends and, and just feeling good and asking those questions. And I don't think that it's lost on us that, that this album is 50 years old in our year.
I'll say that when I was younger, people used to say, I used to hear women say that, when I turned 50, life got better. Life got better in my 50s. And as a young woman, I was like, yeah, right. How can it be better? Oh, but I've got 8 years on you all. And I can tell you that life is better in my 50s than it has ever been in my life. And as it progresses, new things, new opportunities. And so I just welcome to the Half Century Club, and trust and believe life will get better. I think the potential of women in our world a lot of times is we're so busy as caretakers, and we're so busy trying not to, overshadow somebody, or trying not to offend somebody, or trying to be good people, or whatever it is that women are boxed into. And there's something liberating about, not feeling the need to do that. You're probably already feeling a little bit of that, and it's just going to keep getting better. So happy birthday in advance. Nate, how old are you turning? You turning 30 yet?
Meredith calls me the cub. So I'm 42. I'm 42.
Oh, are you really? Okay, yeah. All right. I knew you were the
baby in the family. The baby in the family.
I called them out just to mess with her, just to joke with her. Like, you have a milestone, man. So how are y'all imagining 2021? When y'all think about 2021, do you see masks? Do you see us being able to gather? Like, I know sometimes we tend to imagine things so far out, but 2021 is literally a couple of weeks away. But when you really think about it, how are you seeing it? How are you imagining, moving throughout that year, next year? Nate, we'll start with you. Y'all gotta learn how to just jump in there. This is we on the air, y'all. We can't have all this go there. Come on, Nate.
Yeah. So as far as 2021, it's a couple things that I'm hopeful for. So number one, I'm hopeful that we can start to gather again. I'm hopeful for that. This thing around the vaccine. I just don't know how that's going to go. All I've been seeing is minorities taking this thing on media. So I'm a little, I feel a certain way about what I'm seeing as far as the media is concerned. News and journalism. I think news and journalism has a huge role to play, and I think it'll even get even deeper in 21. One of the gaps that was really early on during COVID was misinformation. And that was one of the things that you just got to see in real time during COVID, during the beginning of COVID, and a lot of times it started with memes, and it just kind of escalated into truth, So one of the first things I heard was Black people can't get COVID. I heard that melanin, if you got melanin, you ain't even got to worry about it. You know what I'm saying? And
heat kills it.
and it was crazy. And then we looked to, Southwest Detroit. They didn't even have translators, who was translating this information, in their meter. So they was getting their information from wherever they can get it from, and then taking it back to the grandmother or the mother, and just trying to figure it out. So I think in 2021, I think that as far as sustainability or how philanthropy has been gauging sustainability, I think it's going to be different. I think we got to think about sustainability in a completely different way, because obviously how we were thinking about it does not work at all. If one thing 2020 has told us, how we was looking at sustainability is not working. It does not work. So we got to completely recreate what that looks like. Also, I spoke earlier about about clarity. I think that continues. I think that we get away from the code words. We talk about exactly what we're talking about. I think we speak specifically, about how we're going to do it and what we need to do it like. So we can just cut down the scenic route and really just kind of take a straight line towards getting it done. So, that's some of the things that I've seen in 2021.
Sarida, how are you looking at 2021? What do you imagine? What are you working on?
And I'm really looking forward to seeing more power to the people. One thing in 2020 that really left me with is just, again, finally people beginning to see the value of organizing and the value of people's voices. I mean, from Black Lives Matter to police reform to this latest movement in Detroit around water affordability. And, despite what anyone would say, for years, I was always saying, all the things that we were attributing that to movement forward in Detroit, it happened from people doing it. It wasn't our leadership. Leadership was following the movement and the demands that residents were making. And I'm hopeful that after this year, been so much, I always was telling people, that was the other frustrating thing early in the COVID days. All the things that advocates have been saying, if we had put in place, it may have changed the way it hit in our city. From paid wage, paid time off, to active wages, to childcare, all those investments. So I'm hopeful that we will really see a lot more of that. Just us listening to our activists and organizers, so that we can really make some real changes.
I love it, Meredith.
Well, I mean, I do hope that we continue to wear our mask until we don't really don't
Dog, I thought
2021.
Jeez.
For sure. But I just think that, we will start to reflect on 2020 and what we've learned, and how we can take those lessons into the future. And we will be kind of answering that question, looking back on what's going on, what happened, what went on, what happened, what can we learn from it? How can we use it to be better now on the other side? So that's really what I'm looking forward to in 2021.
And Kevin and Donna, we want to hear from you for sure.
Yeah, I'm just going to double down on what everyone else said. I mean, Nate mentioned journalism. I'm really happy that we'll be working together to support the local journalism here in Detroit. I'm happy Orlando will be supporting Bridge Detroit and continue to support that, and Urban Consulate and the Authentically Detroit podcast. I think that's all important for getting this message and the narrative shift that we need out here. I'm excited about working with Sarida and others to support organizing and advocacy work, continue to support it. We're going to be supporting it for the long haul, and I hope others will join us to do that work. And then around equitable development, we're already working together to support some work there to really truly demonstrate what true equity means in Detroit around development. It means Black leadership in important roles in the city when it comes to that work. And most of all, I'm just hopeful. I'm very hopeful that during this mayoral election and city council election cycle, that the organizing groups can come together and put together a platform, all the groups working together who want to put together a platform and really hold our elected officials accountable and have them answer difficult questions about policy in this city. Because I'm hoping that this year can be the shift to where it, as Sarida said, it does become about people power and people's influence, And it's not just simply about elected officials making decisions without buy-in from a broad range of our population. So I'm hopeful that we can at least get moving in that direction.
Donna, you get the last word.
No, you have to get the last word. But in January, I'm going to start teaching at Columbia
Let's
University.
go.
And I have a class on January 13th is my first class, and it is, let's see, Building Resiliency in 21st Century Detroit, the Roots and Remedies to Racial Injustice. So I've been doing a lot of research, and I just am really looking forward to drawing on a lot of the scholarships. So much of the scholarship is coming from local leaders who have done research. So whether you're talking about Monica, you're talking about Bernadette, and many others who have really studied our issues. I think that one of my goals is to portray not just the issues in Detroit, but also the strength and resilience of our people, because I think people look at Detroiters as being somehow deficient, and we are so awesome. And we just need to let the world know and those students know that we don't need to be rescued. We need to get people's feet off of our necks so we can do the work that we've been doing in this city really for over a century, because Detroiters have been making moves in Detroit for so long. So I'm excited about that. I'm really excited about the work that we're doing at ECN, just really retooling and updating our mission to make sure we had to change things also. How do we serve a community that is being harmed by this? And what is it that we haven't been doing? And so we're going to be coming back strong. I'm really excited. Our entire building is going to be a wellness and resiliency hub that serves the needs of people inside of the community in many ways, with the idea that well people are not vulnerable to disease. And the problem is that we don't invest in wellness. We invest in remedies, but not wellness. And we don't have a fitness center anywhere in our community where people can just go work out. So if you want to get fit, where's the YMCA? Where is, the Lifetime Fitness? We don't have any of that. And we need it. We don't have places for people to express their creativity, for adults to paint and sing and do kinds of things that really connect to your spirit. And Meredith, you mentioned yoga. We do have yoga, by the way, but we don't have a yoga and dance room. We have these amazing abilities, 22,000 square feet of space that we want to transform into things. And ultimately what we want Authentically Detroit to be broadcast in a podcast studio inside of our wellness and resiliency hub, and to bring more voices in, because Orlando and I love to talk, but there's so many people with messages, and we've got to transform how we connect with people. We keep wanting people to read, and I think sometimes we just got to let people listen, and sometimes not listen, but watch videos. So I look at trying to use these tools to be part of that initiative that Kevin is talking about, where we're really pushing back on narratives. We've got to start exposing some of the falsehoods and really holding people accountable and creating opportunities for people to get information the way they need it. So I'm really, really looking forward to. We're going to kick the year off on January 4th. We're bringing in somebody from Minneapolis to do a full day racial equity training and community organizing training. And this is a woman who has been very engaged in a lot of the social action inside of Minneapolis. So we're going to kick the year off, right?
I love it. I love it. Yeah, this has been amazing. I know that we went over time. I appreciate you guys for sticking with us. Much like, all of you, I think 2021, what it looks like for me is continuing to provide a counter to white dominant narratives about Black folks in Detroit, to continue to tell nuanced stories from the perspective of Detroiters, talking about Detroit. My mission is to provide platform to underrepresented voices to express their power. We are powerful. We are not deficient. We are more powerful than we know. My mission is to help Detroiters sort of unlearn the racist and white dominant narratives that we have internalized for so long. My mission is to destroy respectability politics and elitism within different sectors within our city. by doing just what we're doing right here, right now, having conversations, authentic conversations, making people accessible, right? I understand the relationship and the privilege that I have to know all of you, but bringing you to a podcast where our listeners in the neighborhood gets to know and gets to laugh at and with, program directors and people who fund amazing things, who have, so many resources at their disposal. It is valuable. People know Sarida, people know Nate, people know Meredith, people know Kevin now, and I think that's dope. And I want to continue to do that. So. And be, a guest, so I can put it on my resume at Columbia University at Donna's class, because I have to have that, that notch. Like I was a guest speaker at Columbia University. Listen, we want to thank everybody who rocked with us all 2020 long. It was a tumultuous year. I mean, for a minute, Donna, for I think a month and some change, I was really sick and we hadn't recorded. We hadn't put out an episode, for a nice little span of time and within first quarter, but we back like we never left. Thank y'all so much for rocking with us. Shout out to Meredith, Sarida, Nate, and Kevin for agreeing to come on. I know it was last minute, but y'all love us and we love you back. To every guest that we've had on the show in 2020, thank you for saying yes. Shout out once again to Donna getting married during the pandemic, to her soulmate and being all happy and learning how to say her new last name on the podcast. But she kept saying Donna Gibbons and it's like, did your name change? Like, I'll pause. And becoming a lecturer at Columbia University. That is major. And you better believe every other sentence out of my mouth would be referring to me being a lecturer at Columbia University if I was you. And all of the work that you all are doing. Shout out to you guys for talking to each other and breaking down what I perceive to have been walls between some of these philanthropic organizations, especially when I first got into the work way back in 2012. So those are the shout outs that I have. Donna, do you have any shout outs?
I just want to shout out everybody who went to TCF Center and counted and defended our right to vote. Shout out to you, Sarida. Shout out to Summerwood. Shout out to Kalila. Shout out to my friend Diane. Oh my goodness, am I blanking on her name? Oh, okay. Anyway, shout out to Diane. Shout out to Kim Trent. Shout out to so many people who stood tall on behalf of our community. Without you, this would not have been a successful election year.
Yeah, a vanguard of democracy. Thank y'all. You guys have anybody you want to shout out before we end 2020 officially?
I want to shout out to these Black women in Detroit, man. These Black women in Detroit during this election cycle, it has let me, it's embarrassing to me that I have not been doing as much as I need to do during this election, during the election process. And because so much was unearthed and so much was so seen, and because there was so many friends involved in just hearing their side of it, so there's no way I can go back. So going forward, I got to be a part of the process. There's no way that I can't be a part of the process. So again, shout out to the Black women that lead in Detroit.
All right, we got you on record. Love it. Anybody else got a shout out?
I want to shout out the voters. People got their absentee ballots. They dropped them off. They did whatever they had to do to get them in. And so I'm just really proud of us. And we showed up. We showed up. So shout out to us.
50%.
Yep.
Kevin and Sarida, y'all good?
I just want to shout out Detroit. This city is magical. And somebody used to say, I can't remember who said it, but they used to be, I feel bad if you're not from Detroit. So I just love us. Right. And thank you all for, we showed up in so many ways and supported each other in so many ways during a.
And I just want to shout out all the grassroots leaders who do it every day. The grassroots leaders who do it every day in Detroit, in Highland Park, in Inkster, in Ecorse, in River Rouge, in Pontiac, all the majority Black cities where people battle day after day. I could go on, Benton Harbor, Idlewild. I shout out all the work you do, and we support you and what you do. And I just want to give everybody a shout out for that, because I think that they're out here all the time, year after year, doing it, and they're the one people who keep the communities alive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys once again for joining us. Happy New Year, everybody. This is the last episode for 2020. We'll see you on the other side. Until then, we want you to catch the wave.